Hey folks, and welcome back to Lonely Horde Guitars. So with the guitar 6-pack in sort of a hurry up and wait stage of where we're waiting for finishes to dry, we're going to go ahead and get back into the 25th anniversary amp build. So today we're going to get into putting components on the turret board. There are some red wires that go straight from turret to turret that we are going to do first before we start mounting components. You can see in the instructions here, which match up with wiring diagram. So let's get going on that. Now the instructions do say, you know, try and assemble everything and then solder once it's assembled. I don't think for these wires that's going to work very well. So I will solder those to the turrets. Maybe once we get components and we're pushing things through the top of the turrets, that'll hold okay. But for this kind of, you know, just wrapping a wire around, that's not going to hold. Little runners here are done, so now let's start working on the components. Okay, so we're just going to kind of work left to right along the board. And first thing is these little diodes. They do have a direction, so make sure that you match what they do on the wiring diagram. Now down here, so again, you know, they talk about just sort of put everything together and then solder. In this case, it's kind of holding. I'm not sure that bumping it and so forth would hold up. So if you can get to spots where, okay, well, this doesn't really need anything else to go in the hole, I can go ahead and solder it in safely, then that's a good idea. And so in this one here, the bottom turret here just has a little bit of bus wire going from here to here. Again, I had to supplement a bit. It didn't quite come with enough that I needed, but we'll probably wrap the bus wire here, and then the wire that's going to come through this hole and connect to this turret will also wrap, so we can go ahead and solder the components in. So these little diodes have got a pretty fat lead, so let's see if we can squeeze these in here along with the resistor. And another little diode. It's going to go from here to here. Again, these guys are directional. Make sure you match how things are laid out. This is going to have a few more things go in it, so we're not going to solder it right away. And we can do this bottom guy here. These capacitors are directional. So this guy is a little weird on the diagram visually. It kind of looks like there's a little tiny turret in the middle of these two, but there's not. So this is just on this lug, we've got to run a little bit of bus wire to this turret, which then has a resistor going to here. And then this taps into these two turrets like so. Probably easier to tack on the bus wire while this is disconnected. So let's do that. This upper turret for this capacitor, we're going to have plenty of space in the turret hole. So instead of wrapping the wire that is going to come through here and go to this turret, it might be easier just to stuff it down in the hole. So I'm not going to solder this one because later on I may be able to save myself a little bit of fumbling around using the hole instead of wrapping it. We can come under here, clip some stuff. And like this one, down here on the bottom, I think we're going to have plenty of space for the wire. So I'm going to solder up the top because that's the last thing that goes into this turret, but then I'm going to leave this unsoldered until the wire comes in. Now this one looks like we'll have plenty of space on both ends. So we're just going to tuck it in and hope that it holds on. These capacitors are not directional, so I need to get too worried about them. And we're going to pop these capacitors from here to here and here to here. But there's going to be other stuff coming in. We're not really going to have a lot of space for the wiring, so we're going to go ahead and solder those in, and we'll do the wires around the turrets there. And so there's going to be like 4 things coming into this turret. That might be a bit of a challenge to get all squeezed in, but we'll see what we can do. Worst case, we can do one of the resistors wrapped around the turret. Alright, so I got the wrong resistor out of there. The turret is a little gummed up, so I'm probably going to have to wrap this resistor around the turret. There we go. Ugly, but functional. Now this guy's going to get 10K resistor from here to here. I think I can tack in some of the wiring, so I'm going to wait to just put that guy in place. Okay, so I think I'm at the point now where I've done everything across the top, where I don't think I'll be able to hook the wires directly into the turrets and I'll have to wrap. So now it's probably time to move the rest of this board into the chassis, start fishing wires through, and then hooking up sort of the last little bits. So there's a resistor here, there's one here, and there's one here that I think both ends I can probably hook the wires straight into the turrets instead of having to wrap, which will be a little bit easier. So I missed the start of this recording, but basically what we're doing now is fishing our wires through our holes here so we can get this turret board settled in. Now I have done this the opposite direction, where I wired up the turret board, placed it in there, and then tried to get everything connected on the chassis. I feel this will give me a little bit more space to maneuver. I'm not 100% sure. So we will see how all this goes. think we have everything in the right holes and in ways that are not going to compress each other, and we're not squashing anything, pinching anything, breaking a solder joint. Now we just need to get it settled down in place. And let's get a couple of these screws and mount this turret board. What I will probably do is make a run through here and tie in all the easy ones. So like these, where it's just going to go straight into the top of the turret, and solder everything up. And then for the things that I need to wrap, like this guy right here, where it's going to take a little bit more finagling, hopefully that will free up some room and I can do that a little bit easier. And this might be easier if I go this way since I am right-handed. Some wire strippers that worked better in tight quarters might make this a little easier. Everything else needs to be wrapped. Honestly, this is going a little easier than I thought it was going to be. Big old sausage fingers, hard to maneuver in here, but it's not too bad. The last wire. We're done. It's probably not the prettiest amp wiring there ever was. Next, we're going to put in our fuses. So there are two different kinds, 500 milliamp and a 3 amp. They are labeled on the back, and they are labeled on the fuse themselves, but they're very hard to read depending on the light. The thick one is the 3 amp and the tinier one is the 500 milliamp. Now we're going to do the test, the initial chassis testing as described in the instructions. Everything is turned off. First time we're going to have it plugged in. Nothing went boom. Now, at this point in time, we don't want to go touching anything in here with fingers because it could be energized, and these capacitors can zap you big time. Let's actually see if we get power. Power switch is on. Nothing's smoking. We are reading a little bit high on the voltage. That's where it's supposed to be. And that's where it's supposed to be. Off with standby. Now we should get 442 volts-ish. A little high because they said no load. 490, okay, groovy, groovy. All right, the next test was install the 3 preamp tubes. They've been sitting there for a little bit now. I see the 2 filaments I'm supposed to see. They say let that sit for a few minutes before we move on to the next test. All right. Next, power tubes. Where's the slot? There's the slot. Oh, it's so pretty. All right. Power on. We see hot filament. I have a speaker hooked up. It's alive. All right, there's really only one thing left to do before we kind of close everything up and put it back in the cabinet. In the instructions, they do tell you to check the bias levels, and I used my handy dandy bias probe and went to adjust things. But I found that while adjusting this pot, as I was changing the bias, like the plate voltage was also changing at the same time, so I kind of felt like I was chasing my tail to get to the, the 70% target that, they say is kind of typical. So I just adjusted it so that it matched the 440 volts that it has listed on the circuit diagram. And that put it at about 63, 64% for the power, which should be just fine. It'll run just maybe a little bit cooler than you could if you really wanted to push it. But it sounds pretty good. So the last thing to do is put in our little feet, and then we can slide it into the case. So everything is assembled and working great. I'm not the guy to give a demo. My guitar chops are not that good, but I do say I do like it. It sounds great. I have probably only one complaint about the fit and finish of the cabinet itself. The screw holes for where the chassis is mounted are a little off, and so this is not flush. I have reached out to Mojotone support. I am confident that they will make it good. Here is one of their 18 waters, and see how nice and tight and flush that is. That's what this guy should be too. So other than that, parts were all there. The instructions were great. So Mojotone has gotten better over the years in doing that. I've done 3 of these things now, and every time the instructions just get nicer and nicer. And the only thing I think that was problematic was a little bit of a shortage on the bus wire, and I was able to supplement that. But I have had them in the past if stuff was short or missing. Like, they're really good about getting extra parts out to you so that you can finish up the project. So if this is the kind of content you like, please like, subscribe, and we'll see you at the next one.